A 5-minute break and then is it 2? What we've got through here? We got another hour? Okay, I wanted to finish the first chapter because I covered the parade is just central to the thing. What I read in the screenplay actually happened to these boys. They got in a big fight. When I was a kid, they're right down the street from Water Street where we lived there's Harold Miller lived, the Mennonite family, and they had a little shed off to the side, and it had a second story in the thing, and so we used to go up in that second story and look down into the church service on Sunday, which was not very often, but once in a while. And so that was the basis of developing part of this story, these 4 boys and their antics up there, and of course throwing the firecracker through the window of the church and the thing. All right. Well, let me pick it up. There's only a few pages. All right. The boys throw the firecracker, and then they run down to the river, and then they're hiding, and they all separate. Traffic was heavy because of the parade, and people were already standing along the sidewalk. It would be easy to enter the street without being noticed. We climbed to the street and joined the gathering crowd. I'm going home, change clothes. I should hope so. You look like you've been living in a foxhole. Jimmy Joe laughed. What about you? You look like a POW. Just then a city police car drove by. I couldn't see who was driving, but the cop inside was looking awfully hard for somebody. We'd better separate. See you back here in an hour. Jimmy Joe ran ahead, and I turned the corner, and I ran along the railroad track toward Grandpa's house. I went in the back way through the pantry, and I didn't see Grandpa or Grandma, so I went up the back stairs to my bedroom. I quickly changed clothes and ran back downstairs into the kitchen and started fixing peanut butter and crackers, and then I heard a loud knock on the front door and heard Grandpa open the door and greet someone. I walked into the living room and peeked through to see Grandpa talking to Tiny Hudson. He was a night cop and our CYO baseball coach in the summer. He was also a World War II vet and usually a good-humored, smiley kind of guy, but I knew this was business. They saw them running from the shed, and Steve was the last one out. You know that for sure? Several people said they could identify all 4 of them. Just because they were in the shed doesn't. That's where the fireworks came from. I found matches and several other explosives upstairs. Just because Steve was there doesn't mean they're all implicated. We want to talk to all 4 of them. Tiny, these are 4 young boys. You're talking like they're criminals. The minister, John Miller, had a heart attack. He's in the hospital in McVindle. He may not live. John Miller's an old man, older than me. I had heard enough. I grabbed my peanut butter crackers and rushed out the back door. I ran along the railroad tracks towards the river, where I saw Jimmy Joe running along the tracks toward me in a hurry. Cops have Lawson and Denny. I saw them pick up Lawson at his house, and Denny was in the back seat of the cop car. Hudson's talking to Grandpa right now. The Mennonite preacher had a heart attack and may die, and they're blaming us. What do you think Lawson and Denny will tell them? What do you think? I don't want to go to prison. Jimmy Joe was scared. So was I. It won't be prison. It'll be reform school. For how long? I don't know. The preacher dies probably a long time. Why ask me? Ask the cops. You going to turn yourself in? I don't know. Are you? We both stood there on the railroad tracks feeling lost, wondering what to do. Jimmy Joe nudged a rock with his shoe. I'd like to see the parade before I go to jail. So would I. Let's go on top of the bakery. They'll never see us up there. We walked up the track toward town, sneaking under and around several boxcars along the siding until we got to the alley behind Bridge Street. Military vehicles, floats, and soldiers were lined up getting ready for the parade, so it was easy to go unnoticed. We ran to the fire escape of the bakery building to the top. It was the only building along the street that had a billboard mounted close to the front where people could see it from the sidewalk and street below. We always made fun of the photo advertisement that had a little kid in a dentist chair smiling toothily at a dentist who stands saint-like over him. It was an ad for old Doc Siegler, a former Army dentist who every kid in town was petrified of. We called him the Mad Tooth Fairy. Someone had cut holes in the billboard where the eyes were, and you could peek through to the street below. So here we were, 2 outcasts, sometimes orphan and grandson of the town junkman and a vanished American, and the son of the town drunk, maybe wanted for manslaughter. Looking out over the world on that day was giving tribute to those who had fought bravely for their country in war, and for those who were preparing to fight for their country in war. And here we were, peering out from behind this facade, the true patriots and heroes of the day. And nobody realized or cared. We sat for a while, and then Jimmy Joe began pacing back and forth along the roof. "I'm hungry. Got anything to eat?" "How about some peanut butter and crackers?" I pulled the crackers out of my jacket and handed one to Jimmy Joe and stuffed the other into my mouth. "Thanks. God, the bakery smells good. I can almost taste one of those big, fat, sticky rolls with all the gooey caramel sticking to your fingers. That's a peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth. I wonder if they leave the back door of the bakery unlocked. You want to add theft to the list? We could wait until the parade starts. I bet they'll be out front watching." We watched the crowd gather along the sidewalk and the traffic moving along the bridge toward the staging grounds. Every so often a police car came by. There was always a crowd of cops in town on parade day. City cops, county sheriffs, state cops, and even a mounted sheriff's posse that rode in the parade. We hunkered down behind the sign every time one came by. But even with all the clamor, I could still hear my gut rumbling like a Sherman tank coming down Bridge Street, and I still smelled the sweet aroma of bakery goods wafting up through the vent, not 6 feet from our perch, sending out culinary codes my stomach rapidly deciphered and sent to my brain. Sticky rolls, sticky rolls, sticky rolls. I withstood the torture until the parade started, but when I saw the police car that led the parade with its flashing lights and yowling siren and saw the first flags and heard drums from the first marching band, I grabbed Jimmy Joe and we sneaked down the fire escape to the back door of the bakery. Not only was it unlocked, the bakery door was wide open, just the screen door locked. I peered into the back of the cavernous room, and when I was sure no one was working in the back, I cut a hole in the screen, reached through and opened the door. I looked into the dimly lit bakery, but didn't see or hear anyone. I whispered to Jimmy Joe, "Yell if you see someone coming." I tiptoed into the room where sacks of flour, mixers, and other baking goods were standing or stacked next to the wall. The floor was slippery from all the flour. I couldn't find any baked goods in the back of the room, so I took the risk and walked toward the front. I found a metal rack with trays on it filled with piles of sweets. Finding an empty flour sack, I quickly stuffed as many pastries as I could into the bag. Then I heard a door open and voices. I ran toward the back and fell, sliding into the screen door, making a heck of a racket. And I heard someone yell, but didn't wait to see who. Jimmy Joe and I ran out the door and up the fire escape faster than a squad of Morell's raiders on a mission behind enemy lines to the safety of the roof. We watched the door below for several minutes, rocks clenched in our fists, but no one came. So we took our booty to the billboard and sat down, stuffing our mouths with pastry and laughing, stuffing our mouths with pastry and laughing, until we were ready to puke. Parade was serpentining its way up Bridge Street in grand military fashion as float after float, band after band, marching unit after marching unit came by on the street below. Our Boy Scout troop even had a float with Mr. Hunter walking alongside it, puffing and puffing. I almost yelled and waved like an idiot. And then I looked across the street to the sidewalks in front of the Riverside Tavern, and who did I see sitting on the curb staring up at me? My sister Ginny. I swear, she was looking square into the eyes of Dr. Siegel at me. It was weird. Then I saw Grandpa and Grandma sitting in chairs next to Ginny, and there were my 4 uncles standing behind my grandparents. They had on their old Army dress uniforms and were sucking on bottles of beer. They looked like the Marx Brothers acting in a World War II movie. I wanted to laugh, and I wanted to cry. I wish I were down there listening to their stories about the glory days in the Army and the trucks and the jeeps they drove and the weapons they used and their great marksmanship and who was the best shot and on and on. I half expected Ginny to point up at me and tell everyone where I was, but maybe she didn't really see me after all. Then I saw Jimmy Joe's father standing next to my Uncle Bud, a bottle of Lucky Lager clenched in his fist. "Hey, there's my family, and there's your father." "In the parade?" "No, on the sidewalk in front of the tavern." "Oh." Jimmy Joe peered through the holes in the billboard. "Dad looks drunk. They'll all be drunk when it's over. But I wish I were there anyway. Not me. I don't want to be anywhere near striking distance of my dad." The tank I had hoped for never came. I should have known that Sheridan wasn't big enough parade for a real Sherman tank. Besides, they were probably all being used for training or being shipped to Korea. It's funny, they named one of the greatest fighting machines ever built after one great Civil War general. And what do they name after the other? A crummy little town in Oregon that never amounted to anything and never would. Maybe I should help Jimmy Joe blow up the statue and torch the blockhouse. The only decent-sized weapon in the parade was a 105 howitzer hooked behind a half-track that stopped close to the tavern, and the crew prepared and fired a blank round, rattling all the windows up and down Bridge Street, sending little kids screaming to the legs of their parents, making everyone's ears ring. It was great fun. Too bad they didn't send a live round in the direction of the Mennonite church. But I didn't really want to hurt them. I only wanted to scare them. I saw Jenny clinging to Grandma after the explosion. Like the Mennonites in the Stamfords, she was afraid. And she was just a little girl. The highlight of the parade was a crack Army marching unit from Fort Lewis. They had on the greatest uniforms with blue infantry scarves and matching blue shoulder cords, and the shiniest spit-polished paratrooper hard-toed boots I'd ever seen that clicked on the pavement in perfect step, and their shiny chrome helmets that reflected sunlight, and their chrome-plated Springfield 03A3 rifles that they shouldered and spun and then fired into the air in perfect time, and all to the barking orders of the silver-barred lieutenant who marched beside them. I'd never seen anything like it. Right after the marching unit was Mayor Hillman, dressed as Phil Sheridan, riding a big black stallion, leading the mounted sheriff's posse. Jimmy Joe saw the general before I did, and before I could say or do anything, he was standing on the ledge of the building beyond the billboard, yelling so they could see him, and hurling a rock that smacked the withers of the mayor's horse. The stallion riled up and shot forward, minus its riders, hooves pounding pavement, snorting and plunging wildly into the middle of the infantry marching unit, knocking down soldiers, sending civilians screaming. It was chaos. Posse members were pointing fingers and yelling and riding in all directions, and the crowd was screaming and running for cover, and Jimmy Joe and I was running to the back of the building and thundering down the metal stairs. And then we saw county mounted sheriffs galloping around the street and through the alley towards us, and we ran with all of our might, Jimmy one way, me another. It was like a scene from a B-Western, but before either one of us could reach the river, we were lassoed and bulldogged, hog-tied and handcuffed by angry county mounties and thrown like rodeo steers into the back of a Yamhill County Sheriff's patrol car. It was frightening. Them treating us as fugitives and criminals, and I'll never forget it. We didn't see the end of the parade, but much of the crowd walking home from the parade got to see us, riding in the back of the police car to the city jail. Jimmy Joe and I tried to scrunch down and put our hands in front of our faces, but I don't know which was worse, showing our faces or showing that we were handcuffed. It was humiliating. It was only a short ride across the bridge to the fire station and the jail, but it seemed like miles. Tiny Hudson was standing on the sidewalk next to the front door of the jail when we arrived. He opened the door and pulled Jimmy Joe and me out of the car and let us into the jail. He didn't say anything at first, but picked up a key and unlocked and removed our handcuffs, and then made us sign our names on a paper on a clipboard, then marched us out in front of a white board and took our picture. Then he took our fingerprints, and a clerk asked us to empty our pockets in a tray. I emptied my pockets of everything except a couple of rocks that I had in my jacket that I tried to conceal. But Tiny, being a cop, saw the bulge and pulled them out anyway and dropped them in the tray with a thud that attracted everyone's attention. Then he spoke. I thought you two were smarter than this. A lot of people in this town thought you guys were something. You were the best players I had on the team last year and probably the best pitchers in the league. And you go and do something stupid like this. Shame on you. Reverend Miller's in intensive care. Mayor Hillman has a concussion and a broken arm. I truly hope neither of you ever get to pitch a baseball again. You won't on my team. And with that, he led both of us to the cell, pushed us in, slammed the door, and locked it. He didn't say anything more to us, but turned his back and began talking to the county mounties who had captured and delivered us. Then they walked out the door of the jail, locked it, and we were alone. All right, that's the end of the first chapter. I spoke at Willamette University last week, and Jan, after I read that first chapter to him, she said, "You better tell them that that's not you. That's the narrator. That's not your point of view." And I said, "Well, I hope they know that. You know, I didn't do those things when I was a kid. You know, I went to the bakery, but I wasn't stealing any bakery goods. And I wasn't throwing rocks. Well, I did throw some rocks, but not at the mayor's horse. That's for sure." Does it take any of you back to the old Phil Sheridan Day Parade? So, you know. I know what the casino sponsors a parade every year now. I haven't been to one of them recently. Do they still have the Phil Sheridan Parade?
We went last year.
They do? Well, if you notice what I did, and I did this for a purpose, of course, because one of the main things I try to do in this novel is I try to get the effects of World War II on both the generation that fought it, my father's generation, and the generation that came right after. I mean, I was born in 1942. I was a war baby. Somebody the other day was talking about there is the greatest generation, you know, our parents' generation, and then there are the baby boomers. Well, I'm no baby boomer. I was born in 46. I'd like to be a little younger, but I'm not. So, you know, I think, well, anybody who was born after December 7th, 1941 until, what is it, September 1945 is a war baby. You know, and I think it's a completely different generation. And so I grew up in that sort of milieu. I remember, you know, I look at my mother's album and I see all the pictures shot in 42, 43, 44, and 45, you know, and all of us little kids there, and all of the men are missing from the photos, pretty much, you know, they're all off to war, including my father. But I try to, in the novel, I put in one of the four boys. I have four boys. They're all 14 years old. There's Stevie, who sort of based on me and also based on my cousin Steve Casey. And then there's Jimmy Joe Minnie Waters. And actually, it was based on a friend of mine, Lloyd Roberts, who always told me all the time when we were growing up. I just lived a half block from him. And he said, you know, that he was part Cherokee. So I got the idea. And of course, when I was teaching Western American literature back in the 70s and 80s, you know, I had a really good background and did a lot of research on the Kalapuya Indians and all of the Indians in Oregon, that sort of thing. So I decided to use that. Then the third figure is based on Dennis Smith, another really good friend of ours. And the fourth one, I wanted to introduce, you know, multiracial things, so I picked Lawson Anada. Well, of course, I made a documentary. I worked with Lawson for 5 years, and I really got to know him. And he was in the internment camps from 1942, in about January, till the end of the war, 1945. And so I learned so much, and I really appreciated Lawson and his family. First, he was in Fresno. They took him to the fairgrounds and they imprisoned the Japanese Americans there. And then they sent him to Markee, Colorado, where he was incarcerated with his family until the end of the war. So I use him as a main character with the boys. So I have one Native American, one Japanese American, and two Anglos and things. And so all of these kids, all of their parents had served in the war, and their uncles and that sort of thing. So they all have stories to tell and experiences and heartbreak about the war, including Steve, whose father was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. And then along comes the Korean War, and another war that close after World War II. Can I read you one more little section, about a 5-minute section? Some of these events never happen, obviously. A lot of them are pure fiction, but a lot of them have their kernel of truth in things that really happened, shared and happened, if not to me, to friends of mine and relatives of mine and that sort of thing. So, let's see if I can find a section. Okay.